Have you ever done like a deep squat like this, or even just like sitting cross-legged on the floor and your hips don't seem to just cooperate with you sometimes? If basic positions like this seem tight or even awkward to you, it might be an indication that you might be having some hidden restrictions in your hips. So as a rehab and mobility coach, I'll show you the exact assessments I use with hundreds of my clients so you can pinpoint where you need to work on right now. And you can do it all in under 10 minutes, right in the comforts of your home. But before we test anything, let's get clear on what's happening, starting with your hip flexors. These are a group of muscles that are at the front of your hips that help you to lift your leg and tilt your pelvis forward. If these muscles get tight, it's kind of like having a loop band around your thighs, and they can limit how far you can move your leg around. And that may be a problem for things like jogging, walking well, or even doing the things that you love. So the solution is to gradually expand that range of motion you have by building the strength, especially in the ranges of motion you can't control, aka turning your passive flexibility into active range. So you may be asking yourself, how much range do you actually need? Well, there's no magic number I can give you. Maybe I can give you an average number for each of the joint positions, but how many of us will actually go and take out our phones and measure and calculate how many degrees of range of motion do we have? So to keep it simple, you just need enough for what you do. Some people may need a lot, others less. The goal is to have the range your activities demand. At the end of the day, adequate range isn't about achieving a specific number, it's about having the mobility your activities demand while maintaining strength and controls throughout that range. And here's what most people don't take into consideration about mobility. There's a massive difference between passive flexibility and active flexibility. And there's a gap in between where injuries can happen. Passive range is how far you can move when assisted by gravity, maybe someone helping you out to pull you into that range, or even an external force or load that's helping you. An active range, however, is how far you can move using only your own muscle strength and control. Most people can passively get into positions they have zero strength or control in, and this creates a danger zone. Ranges of motion where your nervous system perceives threat because you lack the strength to control or escape that position. We need to bridge the gap by building strength in your end ranges. And this approach cultivates true functional mobility while dramatically reducing injury risk. And when you can actively control a range of motion, that's where your nervous system surrenders its protective restrictions. So today's self-assessments will help you review both your passive and your active ranges. So pay special attention to positions where you have a large gap, because these are the priority training zones where you need to harness strength-based interventions at end range. So here's what makes today's assessment a little bit different. You're going to be documenting everything. So prepare a phone and your tripod, or even get someone to help you. And we're going to be taking the screenshots at the end ranges. This methodical approach gives you objective data to help you track your progress. And for each of the tests, we'll assess both the passive and active ranges as mentioned on both sides and noting any differences down. So be prepared to discover significant asymmetries and gaps that you may have never noticed. First, we're going to be testing our bent knee hip flexion. The muscles involved are the iliopsoas and rectus femoris, responsible for bringing your thigh toward your pelvis and tilting your pelvis forward. Lie your back against a wall or a steady surface with your feet flat against it, with your toes pointing straight up to the ceiling. So we're going to start off by testing our passive range and use your hands to assist. Slowly bend that knee without going out or in, bringing it as close to your chest with assistance from your hands. Once you're there, take a screenshot. It's 90 degrees, ideally 110 degrees or more. But as mentioned earlier, also take into consideration what are the ranges that are required for the activities that you do. And for the active range test, you're just going to be bringing your knees as close to your chest as possible, but without the hands and the assistance. Use your hip flexor strength to bring that knee up and notice any difference. The gap illuminates where you need to build that active strength. Most people who have less hip flexion on one side will also show restrictions in other planes, which we'll test later on. Next, we're going to be testing our hip internal rotation, often the most restricted plane in modern adults, and this is where our self-assessment technique becomes crucial. The hip internal rotators include the TFL, the glute medius, and the adductor magnus. These rotate your thigh inward and are essential for walking mechanics. You can do this seated on a chair, internally rotating your hips and using the assistance of, like say, a chair or a sofa to help you elevate your foot even further, or even just getting someone to help you to lift it as well. For the active range, we're going to do the same movement but use only the internal rotator muscles and no assistance. And try your best to cultivate the same range actively. On average, we're trying to achieve approximately 45 degrees of internal rotation. Take your screenshot at your true end range for both of the tests. Internal rotation limitations affect your walking pattern, squatting mechanics, and can create compensatory stress through your entire kinetic chain. So do take note if you have any large passive active gaps here and start working on them. If you don't even have enough passive flexibility here, then it's crucial that you start training here as well. For the hip external rotation, we're going to be working in the same position, but we are now testing the external rotation in both ranges. The hip external rotators consist of the deep 6 muscles, including the piriformis and the obturator muscles. These rotate your thigh outward and provide hip stability. Use a band for assistance and try to keep that knee exactly where it is. It's very easy to let it drift into abduction, so make sure that you have pure hip external rotation. For the active range, it's the same movement but now use only the external rotator strength without the assistance. And remember to take the screenshot at the end ranges. Now we're going to test our hip adduction and abduction. These are often overlooked but critical for lateral stability and injury prevention as well. The hip adductors will consist of the adductor magnus, longus, brevis, and gracilis. These pull your thigh toward your midline and control lateral stability. The hip abductors will primarily include the glute medius and minimus. These move your thigh away from your midline and they're critical for single leg stability. For hip abduction, we're going to be lying on our side. You can wrap a band around your foot, raise it up as best as you can for your passive flexibility and take a screenshot at the end range. For the active range, just actively hold it up to the best of your ability and then take a screenshot here at the end range as well. For the hip adduction, you can also doing standing up and then swing one foot that you're testing behind your other leg and see how far you can go into passive flexibility and take the screenshot here. And for active range, just lift your foot off the ground and see how far you can go in hip adduction. But be sure not to tilt your pelvis when you're doing this. Make sure that you're not leaning to one side when you're doing the test as well. If not, you're cheating the movement. Now that you have completed your assessment, it's time to work on those positions that are lacking. So remember, the sensation of tightness is subjective and not always indicative of actual limitations. These tests provide objective measures of your actual range of motion and strength capacity. So focus on the largest passive active gaps first, as these represent your greatest injury risk zones and biggest opportunity for improvement. And if you'd like to go deeper into these methods and receive insights on my complete joint bulletproofing protocols, make sure to sign up for my newsletter where I'll share exclusive programming templates and advanced techniques. You now have the blueprint for identifying your hip mobility restrictions and passive active gaps. But if you're wondering how to specifically target those areas you just discovered, because simply knowing your limitations isn't enough without a targeted action plan, then watch this video next, where I'll be revealing the exact protocols for gaining active range of motion by building strength and resilience in those end ranges so you can transform your biggest weaknesses into your greatest assets.